So the title of this video is called, Is God a Moral Monster? And that comes from an actual scripture verse found in the King James Version in Isaiah 45:7. So let me read that real quick. Isaiah 45:7 says, I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. See right there, it says that God creates evil. So therefore, God might be a moral monster. Well, that's not the way the scripture works. A lot of times people take things out of context, and so they don't give the full background of verses. And the King James Version, while it's a great version, it was written in the 1600s. And while languages don't really change too much, there's a big difference between Old English and our modern English translations that we have today. That's why we have so many translations out there. The NLT, the New King James Version, the BSB that I like to use the most, all of those are modern translations. And the New King James Version actually points out the difference between the King James and the New King James Version. So let me read it out of the King James Version real quick. Isaiah 45:7 in the New King James Version says, I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create calamity. I, the Lord, do all these things. So why would this newer version change the word evil found in the 1600s King James Version to calamity? Well, when we look back at the Hebrew, which is what the language was originally used, not the English, the words darkness and calamity are as follows. Darkness in Hebrew is called choshek, which that may not be the correct pronunciation of that word, but of course, Hebrew is not my first language. But that word means literally darkness or obscurity, or even a secret place. Now, the word calamity or evil in Hebrew is rah, and that has multiple meanings. It could mean evil, distress, misery, injury, or even calamity. So we can see where both meanings are coming from, but really, that doesn't tell us anything at all. What is this trying to say when we look at the big picture? Well, God is speaking about polar opposites. For one, he creates light and dark, order and peace, chaos and calamity. Does that mean that there's darkness and evil in God because he creates them? Is God really evil? No, of course not. 1 John 1:5 tells us, this is the message which we have heard from him and declared to you, that God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. So James 1:13 also tells us that God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt us with it. And 1 Corinthians 14:33 tells us that God is not the author of confusion. And if God is not the author of confusion, which is indeed evil, then he can't tempt us with evil. And if he can't tempt us with evil, and darkness isn't in him, how can he be the author of evil as well if none of those things are true? Well, let me put it this way. I can create a house. Does that mean that I also contain the contents of the house's raw materials that I create, such as wood, glass, steel, cement? Sure, if I break those elements down further into their base compounds, my body contains carbon, oxygen, sodium, and calcium. That doesn't mean that I have cement or steel in my body, no more than God has darkness or evil within him. So what is Isaiah 45:7 exactly talking about then? If you look at the big picture of God's creation, in the beginning, only God existed. There was only him, and he is light. When he initially spoke, he brought about space, time, and matter. And those things, only chaos and darkness existed. Therefore, he created chaos, not that the chaos exists in him, but as a byproduct of the process of creation. Going back to the house example, when I go to build a house, there's materials everywhere. They're not in order. Those things don't look like a house yet, but once I finish putting those items in order, they'll look like a house. And that's what God did to the chaos. He put chaos into order. And we have the universe and planet we live on as proof of that. Now, I'm not saying that God isn't responsible for the suffering that exists in itself. God created Adam, and he created Eve knowing that they would sin. God knew that suffering would follow, but as the old saying goes, have you ever walked a mile in someone else's shoes? And that's exactly what God did. God had a plan from the very beginning, and we are all part of that plan. At one point in his plan, a little over 2,000 years ago, God became human just like us. As Jesus Christ of Nazareth, God lived a human life, being fully man and fully God, complete with all the suffering of the fallen world that we live in today. And he did this so that we sinners could be redeemed from the cruelty, suffering, injustice, and evil of this world. Because of the evil that humanity created, not God, but humanity, God, in human form, was crucified. Though he had not sinned, though he had not committed any evil act, he was crucified as a criminal. After his death on that cross, he was buried, and 3 days later, he rose again to life, having defeated both sin and death. Likewise, all who put their faith in Jesus have this promise and guarantee that they will be saved from suffering and death beyond this life that we have today. It's something that we as Christians, followers of Jesus, not those that call themselves Christians, but the ones that actually follow Christ, look forward to. Jesus is also our deliverer in this life as well. When we let him work in us, he delivers us from addiction, depression, and evil. And I'm living proof of that. God bless you. And I hope this helps somebody out there that's seeking the truth about God.